What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Collider Ladies Night. I have been looking forward to this Ladies Night since January when I first became obsessed with It's What's Inside. Alycia Debnam-Carey, huge congratulations on the movie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
What is the movie you saw, performance you saw, personal experience you had, whatever it may be, that first made you say to yourself, I absolutely have to be an actor?
I feel like for me it really was, it's probably two things. I think I was really lucky that I did a short film, which was like a short feature when I was about 8. And I'd been auditioning and doing little my mom was a children's television writer, and so it was a lot of bit parts for things she was writing on segments. It was make a spaceship out of an egg carton kind of thing. And, I was the kid that would do it and loved it, just was enamored by the whole production, loved all of it. And so I kept kind of doing little bits and pieces, and then I was on this film, and that film completely changed my whole, I think, not just perspective, but kind of trajectory. I think without it, I'm not sure, I kind of feel like I've always wanted to do this, but that was the thing that really set me off on the course.
If not for that, you would have been a percussionist, I read.
Well, for me, I went to a performing arts school, and my dad's a musician, my brother is a musician. So growing up, I was very much around that. And then it became such an important outlet for me. I loved it. I was in a million bands doing different things like orchestras and, jazz ensembles and whatever, you name it, I was in it. But I think for me it was more of a love and a passion, and wasn't something that then I wanted to create a career out of. It's a very different way of life. But I remember at the time they were very excited. They were like, we don't have a girl. Can you be the girl and come to the conservatorium and music and do this? And I remember being in my preparing for my audition and suddenly being I'm not doing this. Actually, it was a real moment that I had that kind of shift. But I think because acting was always something I was doing in the interim, I was always doing it. I think it sort of was maybe I'd fallen out of love with it a little bit and then had to refine that love. I think it's such a, competitive and taxing career. It's not a meritocracy. It's also very hard. It's a lot of rejection. And I think you need to move with the ebbs and flows. And so I think maybe music has always been that kind of consistent passion and love-fueled backbone, maybe.
I love that. Do you still play?
I don't. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I was sort of I've kept it up for a while, but it's not the easiest instrument to move around with, Yeah. It's not let me pack it up in my bag. It's here's a marimba. What do I do?
I get that. I grew up playing the baritone sax.
Oh, amazing.
And I look at it back on the East Coast at my parents' place all the time, and I'm I should start playing. And then the thought of dragging it across the country to LA, I'm what am I thinking? I'm not going to do that.
I don't know about you. I was doing it at such a level, too, where it became competitive. And it is a intense creative place to be. And it's not, if you've seen Whiplash,
yes,
that kind of level of intensity really lives in the music world. And I think it's similar to dance as well. If you're doing any of those, you really you need to be loving it, living it, and breathing it. And I think acting felt more connected, symbiotic to my being than maybe I wanted music to be something that I always had and was just felt like it was, I don't know, not forced and not competitive, I guess.
I totally get that.
I probably need to get back into it, though. I do.
Just for fun, yeah. I keep thinking about it. Why not just get a little saxophone and bring that out? I have an alto, too. I could.
Yeah.
Maybe this conversation will inspire me, and I'll finally do it.
Maybe both of us.
The next time we reconnect, we'll talk about our reunion with our respective instruments.
Exactly. We'll have a little jam after.
So, oh, God.
Oh, I know.
I just started a sweat.
Oh, my God, no.
So you decide you want to pursue acting full force, and then you move to LA, right?
Yeah.
Many questions about that process. First, when you first moved to LA, I'm curious, what is the biggest learning curve you experienced while figuring out how the business side of acting operates?
Oh, big question.
I feel like there's many
many
answers to that question.
I feel like if anything, I think you nailed it on the business side of it. I think I wasn't aware just how much of a business this industry is. And I think I came into it with so much like youthful, innocent naivety of just like, if you're good enough, you can do it. And like and kind of have this bright-eyed, bushy-tail commitment to it, which is, I think you need and is there. And you can see that effervescence, you can see that enthusiasm from people. But there's so much strategy, I suppose, as well, that I just don't think I was really aware of. And it's continued in the 10 years of, that I've kind of been working, where at every level there'll be kind of like a new understanding of how deep that stuff really goes. There's so many politics or, who you need to know, or like getting in the right rooms, meeting the right people, going to the right things. And I think I was just so maybe pure in my response over here, kind of like, oh, I'm just like gonna come out and do my best. And I think that's so important to have. You should have that. But that's when I think there was the realization of actually how much luck is involved, and how much then, you can support that with hard work, and you should, and you need to. But that if you're really wanting to do it, like there's going to be periods of like waiting. And I think I got really lucky the first year I was out here. It was kind of like I got 2 projects off the back, and I was like, this is easy. Like, oh my God, it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then I didn't work for a year, and I had no money. I had like $2,000 in my bank account, and I was just like, oh, I'm going home. And I got to reconfigure, like, how am I doing this? And then realizing that you're kind of crafting the journey that with the cards that are laid out in front of you. And I think there's sort of a misconception that people have of like, oh, you can pick your projects. And it's like, you can pick the things that you are saying yes or no to, but there are consequences to them. If you're like, it's sort of, it's more, it's a lot of, luck, I guess, as well. And like trying to craft like a path that you feel like, okay, I think this is going to move me in the right direction.
This is making me think of this question that I ask kind of often because, there is some luck involved. And also when you're first starting out, it's so important to maybe get a lot of experience, even if something doesn't seem perfect for you. But then comes the time when you have to realize that the power of your own voice is extremely valuable.
Yeah.
So do you remember the very first time you said that, either in terms of picking a project or on a set, a time when you spoke up, your voice was heard, and something for you or maybe the project overall changed for the better?
Great question. I do think it's the realization that your best creative being is who you are to your truest self. And because there is no one else like you. There is no one that's going to be the same creative as you. And so being true to that is so important, so vital, but so hard. And I think it's also in conjunction with you growing up as a person. I don't think you can have that wisdom or maybe awareness when you're so young. And so it was always, I think it's been in my mind for like years, and probably I feel like I was exercising some of that on the 100. I think there was like a moment where I was able to really be involved in like the costumes and the makeup and the hair and there was so much lore and there was so much history and kind of with those characters and that story that there was a lot to play with. And I think I was able to really entrench myself in that. And I think that was one of maybe the first examples. And I think since then, it's probably always been stretching myself to remind myself of that because you're always, comparing yourself to someone else or someone else's career. And as we know, comparison is the thief of joy, but it also robs you of just your ability to have fun and discover more about yourself and like what you're capable of. And so, it's not easy. I think I'm always reminding myself, but I feel like I've slowly been fortifying that. I think also it's revealed itself in different ways too. I think when I directed on Fear the Walking Dead, I think that was a moment where I was like, I'm asserting myself as a creative in a different capacity, and I want to be expanding and growing, and that is a part of my creativity too. So I was so lucky that they were really receptive and wanted me to do that. And I think also just with age, you start realizing like there's so much more power also in my age as a woman now too.
Oh, I love thinking about it that way.
I mean, I could honestly, great question. There's so much to talk about.
Here's something about the power that your work can have. It's about the 100, and I do think about this pretty often. The idea of what that show did for queer representation. And I know there was a bit of a backlash to your character's death, but ultimately it bolstered a conversation that needed to happen. So I am curious, what was it like from your perspective going through that while it was happening? And now, I guess like about 10 years later, what is it like seeing how like queer storytelling in this industry has changed?
I mean, I think you can see it, right?
Big time.
You can see the results of that movement. It was a trope that had been, replayed forever, and it's unfortunate that obviously, this was the catalyst to change it. And I think, but there will always be something that has to be that break to change things. And so, I mean, I think going through it obviously was really intimidating. I think it was really intense. I'd never been a part of something that had so much success. So I was on a really different platform, but I also hadn't been exposed to the world in that way yet. And I was receiving then and trying to process a lot of different experiences and emotions at the same time. And I think obviously feeling so much of that pain from so many people, what they'd experienced was so heartbreaking, and trying to be a source of support and comfort and reassurance or encouragement to push it in a positive direction. But that really then, the fans were the ones who took it there and moved it into a place that had real results. Mm-hmm. And so how extraordinary to see something that was really painful be turned into healing and growing and real change. So, I mean, as much as it was a devastating loss for so many people, I mean, you see the results now 10 years later.
Oh,
that there are real, fully realized characters that are leading shows that are queer, that are LGBTQ+, that have dynamic stories and representation. I mean, that is powerful. So I think it's obviously it's a twofold kind of situation.
To narrow that down to you personally also, because this is coming to mind because we were talking about conventions a little before we started rolling. Do you have any particular fan encounter that kind of cemented in your mind how much your work can mean to people? Because I know everyone always it's just a movie, it's just a show, but this is part of the reason why I sit in this seat. I'm a big believer that storytelling and art in general can change lives. So have you experienced that?
Oh, yeah. It's actually too hard to even pick one. I think I've been really lucky to experience the true purity of fans who love a character in a show in a convention type space, because there's nothing like it on you've got the internet, but it can also be just it's terrifying. But being in a convention space, you are seeing the truest passion, purity of what that means to someone. And for something like Lexa or the 100, it was the amount of stories that I heard that were just very personal, very intimate, that were incredibly impactful for these people to find comfort, safety, reassurance. I mean, there's nothing like it. The feeling that you have of I'm so glad that this helped, and I'm so happy that I could be a vessel for that, because I couldn't just pick one. I mean, it's created communities for people.
Mm-hmm.
People have found friendships over that. People have bonded because of it. They've found people who are like-minded, have commonalities and can really feel safe in them. I mean, what a beautiful thing. And so, I mean, that feels just like what a lucky thing to be a part of. And conventions, it's really hard. I think for me, it's just been seeing that kind of community that's been created.
It's a special place.
It's really special.
I am part of many communities in this business. One of my favorite communities is the horror community.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we have been celebrating It's What's Inside big time. I have so many questions. I was telling you before, I was lucky enough to talk to the rest of your co-stars at Sundance. And during that conversation, I was not allowed to say what was in the suitcase.
I know. I know. We weren't even able to say any. I mean, I wasn't there. I was unfortunately filming. But I know. And everyone just being like, we got the story points, I think, at first. And it was just like, okay, so what can we say about this movie? There was just like, it's a movie with 8 people. Like, that was just it.
Everybody did a real good job of giving meaty answers, but while dancing around all of that, which I was very impressed by. But we do not have to play by those rules anymore.
No, we don't.
So where to even start with this? I'll first ask you about signing on in general for, I guess, a horror movie and also for the acting challenges that this posed to you. When this script first came your way, what was it about it that made you stop and go, I have something to gain from this right now as an actor evolving my craft?
There were quite a few things. One being that it was actually brought to me by Coleman Domingo, who,
I love Coleman.
Fear the Walking Dead, one of my closest, dearest and dearest. Adore, love him forever. He was he was executive producing it, and he brought it to me because although it had a horror bent, I mean, I really think of it as it is kind of like a sci-fi thriller, dark comedy. I mean, the horror really exists in sort of like the more like psychological place. It's definitely not like your typical horror.
Oh, yeah.
I would never even think of it like that. And so he brought it to me knowing that like this will expand your range. It's new for you. It puts you in a different lane. It's also, while it lives in that sort of genre space, it is showing me in a very different light. I get to also, it's kind of an actor's dream to play multiple different people.
I can't even begin to wrap my head around how exciting that must have been.
And so that was its own exciting challenge. I think Coleman being on board was really exciting to me. And then also being able to explore this in a very different way was interesting to me too. And then when I saw our director, Greg Jardin, his materials, what he'd previously done, there was such a distinct style, tone, like vision that when I applied that vision to the script, I was like, okay, like this is going to be really exciting.
Is something else. Like watching it, I feel like the first time I was very much along for the ride, and when I started to watch it again and again and again, just like looking at like the specific like visual and pacing choices he makes and how much that contributes to this whole idea working. That's like someone's brain operating on another level and also a very unique level that I have a feeling a lot of other filmmakers out there can't fully access in the same way.
No, it's his vision is unlike anything I've seen. I mean, people going into this movie, I don't think then you're not going to see anything like it. It's so unique and it's so clever. And you'd think something also like a body swap movie, which is so like there's so many moving parts and you're kind of like struggling just like to keep up. He does it in such a creative way. I'm very excited to see what he does next.
I have so many questions about the body swap of it all and figuring everything out. I think the first thing that I want to ask you about is specifically the earlier scenes and bolstering your character enough so that what happens to her matters and she feels whole. Because this is a rather large ensemble and the movie is like, 1 hour, 45 minutes. That's a lot of characters to service, especially in a complex situation. So are there any particular aspects of Nikki you wanted to make sure that you got across early so that, when her foundation is rocked, the audience cares?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were all really lucky that we got to have 5 days rehearsal beforehand. So we were really able to work together to make sure that we had very distinct characteristics. But beyond that, for Nikki specifically, I mean, she's, we start out seeing her as a very, a social media influencer who appears, quite like involved in her image and can be potentially quite narcissistic, but she is savvy. And there is a real understanding of success and her potential and what she is, what her future can look like. And so she actually has a lot to lose. She's one of the characters that really has created a platform for herself that could be damaged, and one that she's also very proud of. She's kind of the most successful of the group. But I think it was also very interesting when we started filming more and more, we got into some very interesting, like, the way women are also viewed through something like social media, the way we perceive women, how we want to be perceived, these ridiculous beauty standards, the kind of what the idea of what everything is supposed to look like. And she is the model for that. She is the blueprint for all of that analogy. And we also want to see that while that is true, she is also while she's like a beneficiary of it, she's also the victim of all those things that are on the other side, which is, she's kind of, in many ways is like a lot of like the objectification of what Nikki represents, which is a far more like layered, like note. I feel like, you kind of go into this movie and it's like, wow, it's like a really fun wild ride. But there is a lot of like interesting layers that beneath that, if you're really interested in it, like, and the more times you watch it, I think you really understand that, like, at one point, like middle of filming, we were kind of like, haha, it's like, who's in Nikki's body? Because there was so much about like, who wants to be her, who wants to hate her, who wants to be in her, who wants to, control her. There's a lot of kind of what she represents in our society.
That's why it's such a full experience to watch over and over and over and see all of that. I'll save my super big spoilery question for the end that will tie into that a little bit. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure to talk a little bit about your co-stars. And this is a very big question, but it's one I love asking because I am fascinated by the fact that there's just so many different approaches to acting out there. Of everybody in the It's What's Inside ensemble, who has the most similar approach to your own, where like the second you met, you were immediately in sync? But then I also want the opposite, someone with a completely different approach to their work that challenged you to adapt and maybe try something new and for the better.
I know James Morosini and I clicked pretty early on because we were, he's wrote and directed a movie, I Love My Dad, and I think it's incredible. He's incredible. And I think the two of us sort of connected on a real cerebral level of like filmmaking and creating and on a more multi-layered, I think, level of just like, writing, directing, acting. I think I was learning a lot from him in that way. And so we immediately clicked in that respect. But I think he has quite a different acting approach than I do. Maybe he's got the most similar. It's sort of hard to say. It was also hard to sort of differentiate because we really all were working together at the same time. We were all in a rehearsal period, which was quite an intimidating first experience. We were in an attic. There was a huge table. We were all around the table, and we went from the beginning. Okay, it's one read through. You're all your character the whole way through. The second read through, now you're doing it as your character, but now you've seen how the other people do it, so now you're trying to do it like them. Now we're actually going to get up one by one, and you're going to film the other person's freak out in like, it's like film school. This was like drama like school, It was suddenly terrifying to be like, okay, I guess I'm just like now performing in front of all these people I've just met, the actors that I'm going to be with, and like I've got to like be good. I've got to live up to like a reputation or whatever. And I think at the same time that meant that everyone landed on the same playing field. It meant that it neutralized everything because it was like, let's get the silly, let's get the like stress, the intimidation out of the way. Now you're all just like able to play. And so I think, if anything, I really learned a lot from, I don't know if people were saving face, but everyone was so ready to play. And that, I think, was inspiring. It was, for me, it was like a level of get out of your head, stop trying to like think what like everyone is thinking of you. Just do the best job that you can do. And from that, I feel like everyone was very influential.
Oh, what a beautiful creative experience to have. I hope maybe Netflix will be open-minded about releasing some of that footage after. I would love
Netflix. I think you've got to talk to the cast.
I would love to see that.
The cast is going to be like, no.
Oh, it's such like a cool behind-the-scenes experiment to see evolve.
I mean, it's kind of cool. It could be cool, actually. I know Brittany's got mine on her phone, which is terrifying.
Kind of
yeah, I'm like, delete it.
I have to let you go soon because you have much more promoting to do. I'm going to end on 2 questions.
Oh my God, we're done already? I'm like, no.
That just means that you have to come back to Ladies' Night in the future because I have a million more questions we could have done today. I want to ask that one spoiler question. So this, like, it doesn't get any more spoilery than this. So if you have not watched It's What's Inside, now is the time to push pause on the video, go to Netflix, watch it, and then come right back and push play, and the conversation restarts right here.
Yeah.
So it goes back to how Nikki is objectified and also where she lands. At the end of the movie, she is stuck in Reuben's body. Do you think that she will just continue life in Reuben's body, or is there always going to be that fight to get what she had back?
Great question.
I have so many ideas.
100% think she's going to fight to get back. Without question.
Yes.
Although without that on the table, I was thinking if she couldn't, she would have to be in Reuben's body. And then I think she's going to make him like a full like influencer. She just like be basically like pimping him out as like herself. You know what I mean?
I've thought about this
like,
so much.
She'd be like, okay, great. Well, I guess this is me now. So like here's Reuben's Instagram account. Like we're going to do as much as we can. But I think, oh no, she is. She's fighting to get back.
Her fight is undeniable. I think that is the right answer. But given what you were saying before, I think it would be such like an interesting and well-layered sequel to have her experience rebuilding her empire and seeing how that process changes in a man's body.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a really curious way to explore how social media treats different people different ways.
I know. It's this movie was such a surprise vehicle for like how social media changes the game and like what we all think of ourselves, what we want, what we think of other people, like those parasocial relationships, everything that we like, artificial intimacy. Like it's so interesting. So yeah, I mean, I would love a sequel.
Yeah, I want a sequel. There's that part of it too. I also can't get out of my head. And I know there's one line that actually reflects this when someone says like what a wild experience it is to like be looking at yourself and how like not only are we treated differently on social media and everything, but like we'll treat ourselves differently if we look at ourselves from somebody else's point of view.
I know. And view them differently. You're like, oh, I know. It's great.
It's so smart. It's so effective. I'm going to be watching this over and over and over again. We have hit the final question of Ladies' Night. Every Ladies' Night ends with this question. In this business, we give each other awards. I think that's super cool. We should keep doing that. That's very nice.
Sure.
I find that nobody tells themselves a good job at nearly enough. I want to know something you accomplished making It's What's Inside that you know you'll always be able to look back on and say, I am so proud of what I did there.
I mean, I'm proud of the whole movie. I know that sounds so cheesy, but I am. I'm really like, I'm proud of what we accomplished on a really short time frame with a small budget. And I don't think it would have been possible without like so many just generous and respectful, excited, enthusiastic people. I mean, I'm the product of all the actors that I'm also working with, you know? You are only this is not just me in this. This is the product of the crews, the cast, like everyone involved. Like it's very special to be a part of a team. But I mean, in this one, we had so many great things. I think if anything, I'm proud of how much this challenged me. And I feel like I'm proud of that I think I was able to move into different characters with, I think, gumption, fluidity, enthusiasm.
You nail it. Like Greg is the master conductor. Yeah. This idea does not work unless all of you are able to do that in a believable manner. And my God, did you soar in that respect. I'm going to say huge congratulations on It's What's Inside, everything you've accomplished and everything coming your way in the future. Hurry up back to Ladies Night so we can ask even more of this mile-long list of questions I have.
I want to come back.
Anytime. Seriously, the door is always open.
Thank you.